Right.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you to those of you who were able to jump on early. And now that it's 10 o'clock, we're going to go ahead and promptly start. Thank you for joining us for today's LTA BPR webcast, 5 crucial points to consider for a successful BPR project. Go ahead and take a look at today's agenda. We're going to go ahead and start with a brief introduction of LTA and then today's guest, John Berglind. And we'll spend a majority of our half hour this morning discussing the topic. If you do have any questions, like I mentioned earlier, please go ahead and submit those through the chat or the Q&A portals. If possible, we'll go ahead and address those in real time. Otherwise, we do have that time at the end designated for Q&A. So real quickly, a little bit about Liberty Technology Advisors. We're a 100% independent consulting firm. We've been helping manufacturers, distributors, and companies from a variety of other industries streamline processes, improve operations, and reduce costs while positioning them for growth over 24 years. And here is just a quick look at some of our specific service offerings, whether it's having to come in and assist with an ERP software selection, implementation, and provide actual project management, or you're looking to optimize your services and take advantage of our BPR and execution. Our experts are here to help you. And today we're going to be joined by John Berglind, Vice President and Partner at LTA. And important for today, John is the head of our BPR team. So here's a quick look at John's background and experience. John's been involved in countless BPR projects. John eats, sleeps, and breathes BPR, and we're really thrilled to have him share some knowledge with us this morning. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and welcome John.
Thanks, Brad. How's everybody doing this morning?
I think we have everyone muted, John.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. All right, if you want to go to the next slide. So 5 crucial points for successful BPR, really critical to being able to perform this properly. If you want to go to the next slide, Brett.
Yep.
So one of the most important things that we found is you need to bring your A-team to the BPR project. You're going to make some meaningful changes to the company. It makes sense to bring the people that are going to be the successors to the organization. In other words, putting people in place, because typically the team that you put together for the BPR project itself that's going to do the business process reengineering becomes a continuous improvement team going forward. So it's really important to make sure that you have your best and brightest and the people that are going to evolve and move up in the organization as part of this team. Honesty. What are your current processes? This can't be an aptitude test. This has to be what's actually happening. So how are people conducting their day-to-day business? How are the processes that they're using being evolved, and how are they using the system? What processes are not optimal? Are they doing things that they shouldn't be doing because it's just the way they've always done them? And are you taking advantage of all that your current system has to offer? In other words, we always call this the telephone game. So Sally learned from Lou and learned about 80% of what Lou was trained to do. And then Sally trained Bob, and she trained him on about 80% of what she was trained on. And so it continues to go down. So you're never using the system as optimally as you can. And the business processes then kind of fill in those tasks, which is never truly optimal. So really looking at the business process, looking at how you're using the system and how all this comes together is critically important to the organization. and you have to be honest. So one of the things that we always say in our sessions is, this is Vegas, and what we mean by that is what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So in that room, when we're going through and doing the BPR, and we're talking about the current state especially, it's important to note that what is actually happening and not what we think our bosses or somebody else thinks should be happening. So honesty is key. So your IT infrastructure has to be able to scale and grow. It's a robust foundation, and it needs to be able to
Yep. John, you there?
can be done immediately.
Wait, John, I think you cut out. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I'm on a kind of a sketchy internet connection.
No problem. So I think we heard you talking about just introducing the slide.
All right, so the infrastructure that exists right now, when we go through the current state, a lot of times we find things that can be done today. They don't have to wait for a future state or a new system to be put in place. But it's important that we understand what the infrastructure is so that it can support any changes that we may make to the system. It is critically important for that foundation to be in place. And it really helps support the current state, but it also helps us determine how we're going to support the future state and what changes need to be made to the infrastructure to be able to do so. Change management. This may be one of the biggest components that we're going to talk about today. So with BPR comes change management. Change is going to happen. You have to control that change. You have to communicate that change, and you have to make sure that people understand why change is happening. The what's in it for me syndrome. But it's also critical because that's part of the adoption of the future state, part of the adoption of any system you may be putting in place, whether it be your current system that you're just reconfiguring or whether it be a new system. Change is going to happen. One of the things that we talk about, that I talk about a lot, I live in the suburbs of Chicago, and for a significant amount of time commuted downtown, into downtown Chicago. And I talk about the guy who shows up at the same spot on his platform, the train platform every day to commute down, walks into the same car, sits in the same seat, has the same brown paper bag sandwich that he's probably had for 30 years. And if any of that doesn't happen the way that it's supposed to happen, it's a bad day. So change is something that people need to adapt. I'll often tell people, everybody's got a smartphone. Go ahead and pull up your Rand McNally app. There is one that's out there that does exist. It's old, it's expensive, and it doesn't work all that well. But Rand McNally, if you'll remember, those of us who are old enough to remember, used to have their own building on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, right downtown. And today they're kind of a souvenir store that sells maps. So they didn't adapt to change. Edward Demings has a great quote that's out there that says, change is not necessary because survival is not mandatory. So it's one of those things that happens to companies or with companies that they need to adapt to. Ongoing improvement. Just because you finish a BPR session, you go ahead and you put together your future state and maybe even ERP and put together a new system or put in a new system and go live. It doesn't mean that things stop. You continue to change, you continue to adapt, you continue to put in process improvements. You continue to expand the use of the system that you have. All of those are critical success factors to being able to put you into that next level of companies and achievements. So just because you've done it, it doesn't mean that it's over. Everything needs to be maintained. And that's what I talked about earlier when I said a lot of times that business process reengineering team becomes your continuous improvement team. It's the team that you're going to move forward with and push forward with as you adopt to your new normal, your new future state. So some real life examples. We've got a company that is global. They serve the agricultural, automotive, packaging, food and beverage services. They're located in Illinois. They went through the whole current state and discovered a lot of things that they didn't know what happens. Because part of what we do is we put together a holistic team, so a cross-functional team. And so purchasing sits through finance, finance sits through manufacturing. And they discovered things that they were doing that were impacting other areas. And they were able to change those processes up front, so upstream. And by doing so, it made the downstream processes a lot more efficient. And when they put in their new ERP system, it made a world of difference in terms of how they were able to operate, how they're able to carry through, how they're able to implement the new changes that existed, the new processes that they designed. So there's a company out there which they're located in Cape Cod, believe it or not, but and I'm not sure how they came about this. I'm not sure how they realized this, but they do reagents for the pharmaceutical industry. In other words, they're able to confirm that the vaccines can be effective and efficient. They do so by extracting the blood or some of the blood from a blue horseshoe crab. A very interesting business, a very complex business, FDA regulated and FDA licensed. So it's critical when they design their processes that they have good manufacturing processes in place, which for those of you who aren't familiar with the pharmaceutical industry, that is a certification that they have to go through. And those have to be in place, even though their reagents don't touch the patients themselves, they touch the products that touch the patients themselves. So it's really important that they go through and make sure that those controls are in place, either systemically or standard operating procedures that are documented as part of their processes. So we've got another client that does a significant amount of work on both off-highway and automotive in the industry. And they manufacture hydraulic and electro-hydraulic controls. And so part of what they do is a big safety concern for these, for the equipment, for the companies that buy their equipment. And in putting those in place, we had to make sure that there was a significant amount of quality built into each of the processes so that we weren't waiting till the end of the manufacturing cycle to say, hey, this has passed the quality test. It was passing as it went. And if it didn't pass, we stopped it at that point in time and fixed the problem before they manufactured the next piece. Very critical to their organization from how we put this together. They are located in Wisconsin. They are a family-run business, which is very successful. And part of the reason why they're so successful is that they've managed to build the quality into processes as they go along. They are in the process of putting in a new ERP system to help support that, but we went through and did a significant amount of business process reengineering prior to them implementing the system so that the system could be configured to support the quality that they need built into each of their processes. Again, a critical success factor for that organization.
All right, well, with that, I think we are ready to open it up for questions. So thank you, John. If anyone has questions, please go ahead and send those over either in the chat or the Q&A. I know that we did have a couple come in, so we'll go ahead and start with those. But again, this is an open session, so feel free if something comes up to send it in. So John, the first question we have here is, realistically, what kind of time frame are you talking about for a typical BPR session?
So our sessions run from, we lump them into what I would call a mega process. So quote to order, order to cash, procure to pay, finance, all of those become kind of their complete sessions. So depending on the size of the company, it runs anywhere from probably 5 or 6 sessions to, as many as for one of our largest clients, 40 sessions. But it really depends on the size of the company and the amount of change that we're going to undergo and the areas that the functional areas that we're going to touch. I would plan on probably a minimum of 6 sessions, 3 current state and 3 future state, to cover all the functional areas. And then depending on the size of the company and the details that we have to get into, it can expand from there.
All right. Next one we have here is we're implementing a new ERP system, and the last time they did all their BPR in-house. Why do they need to bring LTA to the table?
So the challenge that exists with doing it in-house is people have been swimming in the same waters. So they've been in the company for a while, typically, and it's hard to implement true change. LTA has a history, a 24-year history, as Brad pointed out, of being with different companies. And over that time, we've learned a tremendous amount. We can call them best practices, but I tend to call them right practices, because it doesn't matter if it's a best practice in an industry if it's not the right process for you and for your organization. We can help facilitate that. We can help bring straw man to the table that can that we've seen other clients implement, and help you put those processes into place. So it's not just doing business the way that you've always done business. It's very difficult to change what you're doing when you're intimately involved in what you're doing today. So bringing the LTA in gives you an outside perspective that is different from what you may get from trying to do this internally.
All right. All right, we got another one here. How do you address the telephone game that you talked about to prevent that from happening moving forward?
Great question. So systemically putting training in place that is done as part of your continuous improvement and onboarding, which people organizations tend to ignore a little bit. But the onboarding process is really critical. And it's not just the onboarding process for the system. I need to hit F1, V5 to perform this function. It's why you're doing it. Who does that impact? How does the process work into the systemic training as well? So it's an ongoing active training process that needs to be put in place. And as part of the business process reengineering, it's part of what we incorporate into what you do from a day-to-day basis. So how do I onboard people? How do I continuously train people even beyond the onboarding process?
Great. We got another one here. Is it better to re-engineer a segment of a business process at a time, or just plan for an overall overhaul?
Typically, we plan for the overall overhaul. And the reason being is there are things that happen in business segments that impact other business segments. And until you take a look at this from a holistic standpoint, it's difficult to see the impact that exists on that, the being proactive versus reactive. So something that purchasing does that may impact finance or accounting, and trying to correct all of those, I won't call them issues, but those processes that happen upstream as far as possible to make sure that things that are happening downstream are as efficient as possible. We've got a current client out there right now that has approximately 100 people in their finance department, and they spend a fair amount of time just reclassifying transactions that are done upstream. So if we can fix that upstream, then downstream is a lot less reactive to what's going on, and not trying to correct things that should have happened right the first time. One of the things we talk about in the business process reengineering workshops that we have is, if you're doing a process that's not adding value to your customer, stop doing that process, because they're not willing to pay you for it. So if we can fix things upstream as much as possible, we'll be much better off downstream. And that's that whole holistic view.
Great. Last one that I have here, but again, if anyone has more questions, please continue to send those in. The last one that I have at the moment is, you mentioned the ATeam. Can you specifically call out some people that you tend to have at those on the ATeam?
So the ATeam are going to be kind of your best and brightest, but people who are actually doing the work. So you don't want to have a senior manager or a senior associate that's in there that doesn't perform some of the day-to-day activities, because those are the things that we need to uncover. Those are the things that we need to understand. But these are also people who, while they do the day-to-day activities, are also the visionaries, and they kind of see where the organization could go and the benefits of doing some of the things that that they've thought of in terms of how to improve a process, how to improve operations, because they're involved and they're doing some things. They may not understand why they're doing some of these things, but they do kind of push the envelope on this. So it's important to have those, you know, your kind of up and coming stars in there that are going to help redesign the business. Now, having said that, you also have to give them the authority to make decisions for the business. So you have to have confidence that they have good judgment and that they're going to redesign processes and have the authority to redesign processes that are going to make the most sense for the organization. So, you know, we've had a client in the past, and I'll use this as a bad example, who had some people on the project team that may not be with the company 6 months from the time that we conducted the project. You don't want those people designing your future state processes. You want people designing the future state processes who want to be there, who want to grow with the organization, who want to be with the organization.
Great. Appreciate everyone taking some time this morning to join us. John, thank you for taking time out of your morning as well.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.